Let's dive into Brooklyn, because I think this is a really interesting trade for Brooklyn. I think Brooklyn did as well as they could have in this deal. I don't see any team, like, I don't think the Lakers were going to give up both of those picks for Kyrie, which is essentially what it would have taken, I think, to top this offer if you're the Los Angeles Lakers. Getting like Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith, who is easily movable for another first round pick. Like, if they want to turn around and move Dorian Finney-Smith, and like in the offseason, if Kevin Durant tells them they want to go, that is like assuredly another first round pick that's coming their way. So, and let alone like what Dorian Finney-Smith does for them now, which pairing with Nick Claxton, pairing with Ben Simmons, that's going to be one of the 5 best defenses probably in the NBA at that point, especially with Kevin Durant, with the level he's played at defensively this season. They're going to be really, really good on that end. They're also going to be really big on that end, especially with Spencer Dinwiddie playing the point, given that he is like 6'5", 6'6", somewhere in that like vein. This is a team that's going to cover a lot of ground defensively. They can beat you in a lot of different ways defensively. They can switch defensively. They can play drop defensively. They can play at the level defensively and recover. There's just a lot of different things that they can do to attack you on defense now with another high level wing defensive player in Dorian Finney-Smith. So I actually really quite like this deal for the Nets if the end result here for them was going to have to be that they have to move Kyrie. I think they did as well as they possibly could have. What is your initial impression for Brooklyn?
Yeah, and oh, by the way, they have Royce O'Neal there as well when they need him. So, like a ton of depth defensively. I really like the depth. I understand this is probably the best haul that Brooklyn could have gotten for Kyrie. It's a dream scenario for them to be able to squeeze out a first-round pick, let alone an unprotected one for the future from something like this, while not closing the door on being a competitive team this year. They'll be reliant on the defense. If this is the roster that we see, carry them the rest of the way. But I think the Nets are also in a position to be able to make another move before the deadline. They have a lot of depth pieces here that they can reconfigure in some regard. I'm just curious to know how they're going to go about setting their playoff rotation if this is what they have. They have a ton of options, and I think options are a really good thing for a postseason series because you can match up to your opponents in different ways. You can press different buttons in late game situations as you need. They've got size and length on the wings and front court areas. They've got a ton of specialty shooters that they can have. I think Cam Thomas had a really good showing over the weekend to the point where if you need a scoring punch off the bench, like he might be able to hold up in a rotation there. There's a lot of optionality that they have. But the downside is that you don't always know where your production is going to come from or what you need to plan for on the offensive side of the floor outside of just getting Kevin Durant touches in his sweet spots. And I think that's the one thing this roster's missing a little bit. I really like Spencer Dinwiddie. I like a lot of the defenders and the pieces that they have, but I don't know who that number 2 guy is outside of KD that I really trust to lighten the burden on him to do all that creation in a postseason series.
So this is a Spencer Dinwiddie now that is going to be very motivated. I think that he will take this as kind of a fuck you, if I'm being completely honest. I think that this is a Kevin Durant that if he decides to be in Brooklyn, and there's no indication yet that like he's going to do anything other than be in Brooklyn for the rest of the year at the very least, I think he's going to be very motivated. This team has a lot of different ways they can match up with you defensively that is highly interesting. I don't think they have enough firepower is what it's going to come down to. Like when they're in a series against Boston, who also have a bunch of guys that are super high level defenders that are 6'6" to 7 foot tall, and they can throw out a lot of different like lineup constructions at Kevin Durant to try and slow him down. We saw this in the playoffs last year, right? Like Kyrie was not giving Kevin Durant any assistance, and Boston just threw the entire fucking kitchen sink at Kevin Durant, and it was hard. It was really, really hard for him to manage that. They need to avoid Boston, I think, like at all costs in the playoffs. They need to hope that like they finish in the 2-3 spot and Boston ends up being the 1 seed and, you know, someone like Philadelphia beats them or something like that.
Yeah. Well, even
whatever.
Milwaukee is going to be tough for them because they have so many long physical wings that they might be able to throw at Durant. They're always going to protect the rim well with Brook Lopez. Like, I don't see easy buckets for the Nets coming in a series against them either.
Yeah, no, I don't. Which is like, I think that they would be a really, really interesting matchup against Milwaukee. Like, they have Nick Claxton, Kevin Durant, Dorian Finney-Smith that they can throw at Giannis. And we don't really know what Chris Middleton's going to look like yet in the playoffs. And if Chris Middleton is not 100%, I think Milwaukee is in some actual like problem.
Sure.
Like, is in problem town in the playoffs in terms of being able to create shots, especially against the defense that has potential to be as good as Brooklyn's does. I'm not saying that Milwaukee would lose that series. I think it'd be really close, but I think that there is a lot that Brooklyn can do to cause problems for opposing teams. They also, I thought Nick Claxton did a really good job against Joel Embiid in their last game. They're one of the few teams that can actually somewhat manage that matchup. Not to say that you can ever stop Joel Embiid, but you can at least make his life harder. And if you make Joel Embiid's life harder and you can figure out a way to slow down James Harden in ball screens, it becomes a little bit easier to defend Philadelphia as well. Ultimately, I don't think they have enough firepower, is what it comes down to. But they have enough to make life exceptionally hard in a playoff series when they also have Kevin Durant, who is still, like, up until he got hurt recently, one of the absolute best players on planet Earth. Honestly, like, probably has a case still to be the best player on planet Earth prior to that injury. So when you have that guy and you have all of the defensive versatility in the world and you have a decent secondary creator in Spencer Dinwiddie and a ton of shooting, by the way, and whatever Ben Simmons is, like, I think that we should probably stop assuming there's going to be a star turn from Simmons, but if he can be a secondary creator next to Dinwiddie and they can run some short roll action, they can get him kind of passing and kicking out to Durant, to O'Neal, to Finney-Smith, to Seth Curry, to Joe Harris, all of these other shooters and floor spacers that, by the way, Dorian Finney-Smith gives them more cover to be able to have on the court offensively. I don't know, man. Like, there is something there. There is. This is not just like a pushover now. I don't think. Like, this is like a good team that could cause opposing teams problems, I think.
I think so, but I also think that what we know about winning championships in the NBA over the last 10, 15 years is that you probably need more than one star caliber player. You need two. And the Brooklyn Nets, unfortunately, have gone from having two to now having one. As much as we can like the auxiliary pieces around them, the versatility for their lineups, betting on Dinwiddie to come out with a chip on his shoulder and really want to play hard, Kevin Durant has gone from having another star alongside him to now being the only guy in town. And I wonder, A, how is that going to hold up in a postseason series when we know that teams like Boston have had success in taking him away, or at least making his life really, really challenging as the only star that's operating? And B, does he look at the rest of this roster and feel like it's 100% good enough for him to want to stay through the deadline? Like, I don't want to conject about anything. I'm not saying that I would assume Durant would ask out for a trade, but I also wouldn't rule it out at this point either. If he looks at the roster and says, this might be too hard to win a championship right now. I have no idea.
So as far as I know, this deal has not been, like, officially put through the league office. And I wonder if this is something that John Hollinger, my colleague over at The Athletic, brought up. I wonder if they spend the next, like, day or two canvassing the league to see if there's a way to rope in a third team with, like, the Finney-Smith deal, with the Spencer Dinwiddie deal. Could Chicago look to move, like, one of DeMar DeRozan or Zach LaVine? Could Toronto want to get involved in something like this in order to, like, try and shift around stars and try and pick up assets? I don't know. They also have the Ben Simmons deal that they can just functionally do that with anyway. And if I was Brooklyn, I'd be trying to use that deal to do a, like, separate star move. Like, if Chicago decides, I mean, look, like, here's the other thing. Like, Chicago could decide that they want to get off of the Levine deal, and it makes more sense for them to do a Finney-Smith and, Spencer Dinwiddie deal than a Ben Simmons deal, because Ben Simmons has more money left on his deal. I don't know. But I think they're probably another trade away. I will be interested to see if they look to go down that road, or if they look to ride with this team into the playoffs, see where it goes. And then if it goes nowhere, maybe Kevin Durant requests a trade in the offseason. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe they try and bring in someone like a DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine in the offseason. If Chicago decides to change their tune, or maybe if Bradley Beal decides to change his tune about being in Washington, who knows? I think that there are a lot of options that could come available. We will see the way that works out. Is there anything else that you want to talk about with Brooklyn outside of them being still? I think they're still very competitive in the East.
Yeah, for me, it was hitting on the postseason series with both teams and trying to look at this from a lens of how do you increase your opportunities to beat the best teams in your conference. I think Dallas has a real challenge on the defensive end of the floor that they still need to make moves to sort that out. Brooklyn, they can do it with this roster a little bit on the defensive end. I'm more worried about the offense. Do they have somebody else to ease the burden off of Durant of having to do everything on his own against a really good playoff team?